Russia has become the first country to officially recognize Afghanistan's Taliban government as the country's legitimate authority. Now, this marks a significant step towards international acceptance of the Taliban, nearly 4 years after they took control.
A new flag now flies at the Afghan embassy in Moscow, something the Taliban were waiting for eagerly. In Kabul, the Russian ambassador officially conveyed his government's decision to recognize the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.
We have sent our diplomats to those countries where we have embassies. Secondly, those countries accept our ambassadors, including Russia. Now, as Russia has become the first in our recognition process, we hope the series will continue. We welcome this, and it will further enhance our relationship with Russia.
Moscow has long been working with Kabul on counter-terrorism, calling it an ally in that battle. The group known as Islamic State Khorasan, based in Afghanistan, killed more than 130 people last year at a concert hall outside Moscow. Earlier this year, a court removed the Taliban from Russia's list of terrorist organizations. Russia said it wanted to pave the way for a full-fledged partnership with Kabul. And it's not only Russia. Other countries in the region have already been working with the Taliban. China was quick to welcome Russia's move, arguing that Kabul should not be excluded from the world.
China supports the international community in strengthening engagement with Afghanistan's interim government and jointly helping Afghanistan in reconstruction and development. We support Afghanistan in combating violent terrorist forces and making contributions to peace in the region.
India has also been extending cooperation with the Taliban. For instance, supporting Afghan refugees deported from neighboring states. Then there's Afghanistan's immediate neighbor, Pakistan, which has a troubled relationship with the Taliban. Islamabad accuses the Taliban of sheltering and supporting Pakistani militants, an accusation the Taliban deny. Despite these complex relations, Pakistan is a major trading partner of Kabul. But Afghanistan remains a pariah state globally. It has draconian restrictions on women, including education that is banned beyond the 6th grade.
Nearly 78% of Afghan women aged 18 to 29 are neither working, nor studying, nor training. Rates of intimate partner violence are rising. And education bans alone are estimated to cost Afghanistan $1.5 billion by 2030.
Russia's recognition of the Taliban, a sign of how strategic interests outweigh human rights.
Yeah, let's look at this with Alexey Yusupov, who's director of the Russia program at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation and the foundation's former bureau chief in Afghanistan. Welcome to DW. What do you see as being behind this Russian decision?
There had been intensifying flirtations between Moscow and the Taliban even in 2021, just before they came back to power. And actually, it's quite a stunning reversal of history, right? Because Moscow, under Vladimir Putin, had been a supporter of the American-led intervention after 9/11. Russia had opened up its skies. They allowed NATO logistics on the ground inside Russia to sustain operations of the intervention in Afghanistan. But it all has turned around towards the end of the mission of the Western-led coalition. And now it's a very welcome example for Moscow of how this example of the liberal rule-based world order, as the experts and the American diplomats like to call it, has probably not delivered what it promised. And so it is accepting the realities on the ground, which is Moscow's aim here, because they also want to actually stimulate the same in Ukraine. This is one of the arguments I would actually claim. And then it's just sticking it up to the Americans, right? It's also very important to the propaganda out of Kremlin.
Okay, so what are the material benefits that Russia gets from this then?
There is ideas fleeting around about actual trade routes opening up. They are not new, but there is a potential link via land to Iran and then to some ports like Chabahar or Bandar Abbas on the Iranian shore, they're far from actually being active, but it has been floating around. And in a situation where the Russian Federation is actually encircled in terms of economic sanctions, it might become something real in a matter of years. A second argument is actually that, there is trade happening. Afghanistan is in dire need of grain, other agricultural products, and also energy resources, and theoretically could offer a lot of rare earths, gold, and other minerals and resources which are in its ground, but very hard to excavate. During the Soviet occupation, a lot of geological surveys have actually produced maps of potential exploration. And actually, Donald Trump in his first presidential term was very interested in rare earths out from Afghanistan. And so this is also an argument which is being cited for this new chapter, but again, it's something which is more reasonable on paper at the moment because it would take a lot of years, a lot of investment, and a lot of security guarantees from the Taliban government that actually those joint projects would work and would actually go forward. Because even the Chinese investments so far, which are much higher in magnitude, are not really materializing.
And so we must presume then that Moscow has fewer problems with the Taliban's human rights record and their restrictions on women and girls. Yes, I think this is something where Moscow turns a blind eye to it. It's not like they celebrate the domestic issues, but again, it fits the geopolitical narrative that, the world is comprised of different kind of political regimes, and legitimacy is produced by de facto power on the ground. This is what Moscow does at the moment, right? It shuns the one criterion for international recognition, which is legitimacy, and it focuses only on the question who is actually in power in Afghanistan. And the answer to that is quite clear at the current moment. It is the Taliban. It is the emirate. And so here, the question of how the situation with the human rights is, what about domestic policies towards women, towards children, towards minorities, towards education, Moscow is not interested in elaborating this. Okay, and the benefit for the Taliban, presumably, is, well, they have a big backer now. They have recognition from one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. They have that, and again, they can bolster trade. They can travel through Russia to other platforms, to other countries. They have been doing this also quite recently. They also can, I think, offer both the Chinese but also the Indians and other countries in the region a new level of diplomatic engagement backed by Russia. And then again, Moscow is constructing this narrative that there is a new wave of anti-colonial struggle going on, right? So Moscow's efforts focuses very much on this argument that Western colonialism hasn't ended, and now is also time to support struggle against that. And that might actually become one of the examples where the Taliban try to show that their victory over the American invaders, this is how they frame it, is actually an example of that it works. So I would expect a lot of PR around this, and I would expect a little bit of real trade-oriented, economic, very pragmatic interest where Afghanistan tries to find some betterment for its quite dire economic situation. China welcomed this move, but hasn't followed suit. Why? Again, there's a high level of pragmatism here, I would say. There is Chinese business in Afghanistan for quite some time already. But China doesn't also invest into diplomatic adventures like that. They also haven't recognized Crimea, if we start recounting what they haven't done, and it doesn't affect their relationship with Russia in any way. So I would assume that they will increase their engagement with Afghanistan. They have a joint border. Again, they have the interest in the rare earth. They have the business investment, but they don't really need to invest into something which might antagonize Pakistan, might antagonize some other countries. So it's a very cautious, very pragmatic approach. Thanks for talking us through that so clearly, Alexey. Alexey Yusupov from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Thank you. Thank you. Let's explore this with Ibraheem Bahiss, who's a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group's Asia program. He joins us from the Afghan capital, Kabul. Welcome to DW. Let's start with why Russia's doing this now.
Perhaps the timing of the Russian decision to recognize the Taliban is unexpected, but I would argue that the underlying factors that have led up to this moment perhaps have been it's a trajectory that's been ongoing for many years. As mentioned in the report earlier, Russia has been one of the earliest regional players that has tried to forge a common approach towards the Taliban when they took over in August 2021. In September 2022, they tried to negotiate an agreement, an economic agreement or a trade agreement involving gas, oil, and wheat imports into Afghanistan. Again, as the report mentioned, in March 2024, during the Crocus City Hall, ISKP, the local chapter of the Islamic State, which has a heavy presence in Afghanistan, was implicated to be involved in that attack. And Moscow argues that the Taliban has been a reliable counter-terrorism partner when it comes to quelling Islamic State's presence in Afghanistan. So that security consideration is perhaps one of the main reasons why Russia has been so eager to engage with the Taliban. There are also economic factors, and it's not just Russia. Many regional capitals, particularly Central Asia, take a keen interest in trying to engage with the Taliban, their pariah status notwithstanding. I guess the question really for regional capitals is, how do you continue to reward positive behavior from the Taliban when it comes to security cooperation, when it comes to economic integration? And perhaps Moscow felt that it was time to reward Kabul for the cooperation it had received by formally recognizing it and paving the way for other regional capitals to follow suit.
And do you think it is likely that other countries will follow suit?
Regional countries have indicated time and again that recognition of the Taliban is a matter of course. A senior Uzbek official a few weeks ago mentioned, for example, that recognition of the Taliban was inevitable. I think the real big question is whether Beijing will follow immediately in Moscow's footsteps. If it does, I think it could lead to a cascading event where other capitals follow suit. On the other hand, if Beijing withholds, we might see some regional capitals begin to take that step, but it might be much more lukewarm in terms of how they approach it.
You see, the China example is interesting, isn't it? Beijing welcomed this move by Russia, but hasn't followed it. So if this is such a welcome move, why has China still decided to wait and see?
Well, it's worth mentioning that Beijing was the first country to accept the Taliban's diplomatic presence at ambassadorial level. In December 2023, Beijing accepted a Taliban at an ambassador level. Other countries had followed suit. We had the United Arab Emirates, we had Uzbekistan, we have had Turkey, Pakistan, and now Russia all accept Taliban diplomatic mission at ambassadorial level. At the time when Beijing accepted the credentials of the Taliban diplomat, it publicly stated that this did not amount to recognition. But as you said, perhaps Beijing is withholding that to see how future developments hold and whether it warrants it. Beijing has been quite consistent that the Taliban need to uphold their security commitments to the region, and there are emanating concerns not just from Beijing but many regional capitals. So I think that would be perhaps one of the reasons why many regional capitals have withheld formal recognition of the Taliban.
Okay, so they're waiting for better behaviour or more guarantees from the Taliban government. Explain to us how, if this Russian recognition of the Afghan Taliban government, how that is likely to affect the lives of Afghan people.
Well, I think it's alone by itself, it's not likely to change the challenges Afghans face. At the moment, since the Taliban's takeover, some of the key challenges really have been because sanctions on the country have kicked in, and despite the general licenses being issued both by the US and at the UN Security Council level, it's been very difficult for Afghanistan to connect with the global financial system. And as a result, the private sector here has suffered quite significantly. I think on a more broad scale, recognition of the de facto government here would ease pressure and allow more international institutions, including banking institutions, to connect and trade with Afghanistan without fear of repercussions and without fear of violating sanctions. But as of yet, just Moscow's recognition alone is unlikely to move the needle on that front.
Thanks for talking us through that so clearly. Ibraheem Bahiss from the International Crisis Group.